Hello and welcome to the Aligned and Confident Dating Podcast. I am your host, Colette Gallagher, and today's topic is the 5 red flags in the talking and dating stage. I think we are all ready to get started here today on today's episode of the Aligned and Confident Dating Podcast with me, your host, Colette Gallagher. So grab your tea and let's get started. I got mine. Really love this topic because when I talk to a lot of women who have been in relationships that they weren't really happy about at the end, when you're breaking up and you're looking back at the relationship, you see the red flags and you're thinking, why the heck didn't I pay attention to myself, pay attention to my gut? And because I knew, right? We're very intuitive and we have this sixth sense and we know when someone's lying to us, we know when something's off. But a lot of times when our hormones are all going crazy, maybe we haven't dated in a while or we haven't been with someone in a while, and we're with someone and we're like, oh my gosh, this guy is so cute and we have so much in common. So maybe this person could be the one. And so we just ignore all of those little things that in hindsight we're like, wow, I shouldn't have ignored that. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And there's a bunch of them, but I'm just going to talk about 5 of them. So one of the red flags that happens is the guy, instead of asking you what you want or asking you to do things, he tells you. So this reminded me of the time I was at my gym. And there was like this really hot guy and I started talking to him after jiu-jitsu and he was cute and he seemed nice and I was like, okay. But it was really interesting because he would be like, sit down, come talk to me. And at first I didn't think anything of it. I was like, okay, so I sat down. And then as I, kept seeing him at the gym, I noticed that he was very commanding, which it was so subtle, you could definitely make excuses for it. Like, oh, okay, he's just asking me to sit down. But it just means he's probably controlling. So after I think the 3rd or 4th time of talking to him, I was like, no, this guy, he's I feel something is off with him. But I could see a lot of girls maybe just ignoring that and then finding out later, I didn't know him well enough to know if he was abusive or anything like that. Like I said, after 3 times talking to him, I was like, okay, something's off with this guy. But I could definitely see how it was so subtle that you could easily brush it off or something like that. So when a guy respects you and is communicative and he asks what you want to do, like, hey, do you want to come over and hang out and sit down? It's completely different than someone telling you what to do. And if he's already starting to tell you what to do in the very beginning, and again, it wasn't rude, it was very subtle. It was like, oh, hey, come on, sit down next to me and let's talk, right? So it wasn't anything that you would have been like, oh gosh, this guy's bossy. I was flattered in the very first time because I was like, oh, okay, he wants me to come sit with them, cool. But yeah, I noticed that. So just pay attention to those little things that, you could easily just be like, oh, okay, no problem, and brush it off. But if you really think about it, it's kind of weird, right? So that's number 1. Number 2 is the guy seems to have a problem with a lot of things. So when you're getting to know him, you start talking to him and he starts complaining about a bunch of stuff and blaming other people for things. So maybe he's talking about work and he's telling you all about how, his coworker is terrible and, it just sucks because he's slowing him down and he could be so much more further ahead if it wasn't for this guy, or he could be here if it wasn't for that lady, or the waitress is terrible when she's really not that bad, or, he's just complaining in general. Because remember, at first you're just having fun, you're getting to know someone, but if things progress, is this something that you really want to be around long term? So you might as well cut your losses and just move on, you know, in the beginning. Because if you're already seeing these red flags within the first 2 months, it's only going to get worse, because pretty much most people are on their best behavior in the first few months of dating. And so if on their best behavior they're complaining about everything and they're blaming everyone else for all their problems, guess who they're going to be blaming in 6 months from now when you guys are, you know, getting more exclusive? You, right? That's who's going to be blaming for everything, because he obviously is not taking responsibility for things. And I mean, granted, yeah, sometimes things aren't your fault or whatever, and so it's like legitimate. But if you're just noticing a pattern, oh, it's his ex's fault that they broke up, it's his mom's fault for this, and he just seems to continue, he or she just seems to continue with blaming other people or circumstances for things happening in their life, that means they're not really ready to be responsible for their life and their choices. And that doesn't play out well in relationships. So that's the second red flag. The third red flag is when the stories just don't line up, right? So you're talking and he, you know, maybe they told you something on the first date, and now it's like the third or fourth date, and maybe the story is different, things are changing, and you're like, wait a second, didn't you tell me that this happened? And the person's like, oh yeah, but like, and then there's like this cover up. So just pay attention to things like that when the stories are out of alignment, when they say they're going to do something but then they don't do it. So, you know, oh yeah, I've been meaning to go on this diet, but you know, it's hard. And then, or like, oh yeah, I'm eating healthy, and then you see him eating a cake. And this isn't about judgment necessarily. It's just about, you want a partner that can keep their word, right? You want someone who does what they say they're going to do. And if they're already doing these things within the first few dates, where their story isn't lining up, and maybe they said, oh yeah, I went out with my friends last weekend, but then the next time the story is different. Like if they're already doing those things in the beginning, then you want someone who's honest, who can just tell you the truth, who can own what they do. You don't want someone where you're trying to have to remember everything they said to catch them. You know, just cut your losses, walk away. You know, there's plenty of people out there, and I know sometimes when we haven't dated in a while, or we've been dating and we're having like these bad experiences or not great experiences, and then we meet someone that's like, oh wow, this person seems different. It's super easy to just brush these things off and just be like, oh, let's see what happens. And then you wasted 4 months or 6 months or 10 years with somebody who, if you just walked away and cut your losses, you may have found someone that, you know, could be truthful with you, that could own their stuff, that can be responsible, that can ask questions and care about what you want, and not be commanding. So the fourth thing is they don't respect you, your choices, or your time. So if they're starting to criticize you and they're starting to, you know, tell you things, and if you start to like wonder if they like you, or wonder if, you know, if you're starting to feel bad because they're like telling you things they don't like about you, maybe they're trying to say like, oh, you look better with this haircut, or I had one guy tell me like, oh, it looks like you're gaining weight. And I didn't take that very well. So, you know, sometimes if they're starting to criticize you right away, or if they're late, or if they're canceling plans last minute. So if you have plans with somebody and then they're like, oh, sorry, I can't make it, or I fell asleep, like, again, like, don't make excuses for people. It's so easy to do, I know, but just be like, okay, no problem, and go out with your friends, go on a date with somebody else, you know? Like, don't sit around waiting for someone and wondering if they're gonna call, and wonder if they're gonna be on time, or if they show up continuously 15-20 minutes late every time you're supposed to go out. and once or twice because of traffic, okay, but if it's like every single time, they're showing you that they don't respect your time. So again, what do you want in a relationship? And do you want someone who's going to respect your time, who's going to be on time, who's going to show up when they say they're going to show up? Or do you want someone who's kind of leading you along, right? Long term. So think about these things. The fifth one is someone who moves too fast. So this is a red flag because in the beginning of a relationship, like you don't even know if you can be friends, right? In the first like month or two, you're not even sure if you even like this person's company. And sure, they're like super attractive and like, it's fun to have someone to cuddle with and whatever. But like, if they're trying to like jump into a relationship, if they're telling you that they love you after the 2 weeks, like they don't even know you. And it's super easy to get flattered. And this is actually how narcissists work. They and this is how gaslighting starts too, is the person will start off and they are super flattering and they're telling you like, oh my gosh, we have so much in common. I love your company. I just want to be around you all the time. And so you're thinking, oh my gosh, like me too. This is amazing. This is so cool. I found someone who likes me. And the thing is, if somebody's trying to jump into a relationship super quickly, either they have like attachment issues, they might be super needy, or they may be setting you up to get you to chase them. So basically what happens is they start doing all of this stuff and you're super flattered and you're like, oh my gosh, like this person really likes me, and then they change. And you're wondering, okay, what happened? Things were so good. And this is after like 3 months. So usually the person will just be super into you, telling you all the things that you want to hear for like 3 to 6 months. And then all of a sudden things change where they just act like they don't care anymore. And you're like, what happened? And so then you spend like tons of time trying to figure out what you did wrong, what you can do to be better, what you start chasing them and trying to get their attention back again. So this is actually like a tactic. So you have to really watch for this one because it's really setting you up. It's like getting you to, to trust, to fall in love. It's called love bombing. And so you're thinking like, oh my gosh, I met like the one. I mean, I can't believe how wonderful they are. We have so much in common and things are just so perfect that we never fight. And then boom, all of a sudden he like starts doing little things, he or she starts doing little things and you're like, what happened? So don't put yourself through that. Take things slowly and just make sure that you're really getting to know someone. The first few months of dating should be like the fun times, they're getting to know you, just, getting to know a new person and exploring different people and not getting attached no matter how cute they are. And if they turn out to be the one, that's perfect. That's amazing. But there's no reason to rush it because if they really are the one, you have your whole lives to get to know each other and to be together. So there's no reason to like jump into a relationship. And I see this a lot. And then people are confused about what happened because they rush into a relationship. They ignored all the red flags, and then 6 months to a year down the road, they're feeling like stupid because they put all this time and effort into a relationship, and now they feel like they have to hold on to it instead of, like just walking away when they see these red flags. So now that you know the red flags, I just want to give you some questions, some tools you can use when you're dating. So if you're dating someone and they're starting to do things, like ask yourself, if they were doing this to my mom, my sister, my brother, someone I love, someone I really care about, if they were doing these things around that person, would I be okay with it? Because a lot of times we're willing to put up with things. We're willing to put up with things that we wouldn't let somebody that we love put up with. We would tell them to walk away, right? So that's a good question to use. And also, how would you react? So how would you react if they were saying and doing these things to someone you really loved and care about? The next question is, are you trusting your gut? Does something feel off? And so again, we're super intuitive, and you don't even really need like a real red flag. If you're just feeling like something's off, because this happened to me, I was dating a guy who was super nice, and I met him at a party, and he went away to like out of town for a few weeks right after I met him, but he still like texted and he called me a few times, and I didn't really think much of it because, you know, he's on vacation. When he came back, we started hanging out, and he would kind of like stop. Like I wouldn't hear from him for a few days here and there, which is okay, but something felt off. And in my gut, it felt really weird. Like I felt this like fear sometimes when we were hanging out, and I was wondering if that was him or me. And so I thought that was really interesting. And then it turned out that he was actually dating someone long distance. So when he went out of town, he was actually with this person that he was with. And so after like a month and a half, he finally came clean and told me, you know, I didn't think things were gonna like, you know, move this quickly with you. And I mean, they weren't moving that quickly, but I guess since he had a girlfriend in another city, they were. But anyway, we ended up breaking up because, you know, I'm not trying to be with someone who has a girlfriend. So that was fun. But if I had just like listened to my gut and had just said, okay, you know what, something's weird here, I'm just gonna, you know, leave it alone, it like, you know, I would have saved myself some time. And so I think it's really easy to just ignore ourselves. So, you know, just listening to your gut, listening to anything that feels off. You don't even have to have like a real reason. Another thing you can ask is, are you blaming yourself for their bad behavior? So when they're telling you things, are they blaming you? And then you're like, oh yeah, this is my fault. This is something, you know, I shouldn't have done that or whatever. Like they're right. Are you finding yourself doing that? Because a lot of times, like that's actually a type of emotional abuse where they're blaming you for everything. And if you're used to being blamed for things, you're gonna think it's normal. So when I was little, I was blamed for like everything that happened with my mom. And so I thought it was normal, like, okay, you know, it's normal to blame me, you know, maybe it's my fault. And so, but it's probably not. Like, you know, if you are doing things where you're actually rude and, you know, or abusive, or you're actually yelling at someone, okay, you know, maybe you do have some blame there. But if they're blaming you for things that are totally not your fault, like at all, then, you know, just walk away. There's no reason to be blaming yourself for their bad behavior or accepting the blame. And then, do you have to change who you are or what you're doing to be with them? So do you have freedom in your dating with this person? Or do they make you feel like you should stop what you're doing, stop hanging out with your friends, stop your hobbies, so that you can go on a date with them or spend time with them? And a lot of times we do this on our own, which I do not recommend. Definitely keep your hobbies, keep your friends, especially in the beginning, because you don't know if this is going to work out for the first 6 months, for sure. And so you definitely want to keep your life. And it's, again, I get it. It's super easy to like someone and then be like, oh, I want to be with them. I'd rather be with them than anyone else, but it's just not healthy. And so if they're like making you feel guilty, or if they're making you feel bad for wanting to spend time with other people or keep your hobbies, then that's, you know, that's a red flag. You definitely want to be able to do what you want to do without having to defend yourself, without having to feel bad, and still enjoy time with the person. And then the last question is, are you able to communicate openly with how you're feeling? Or do you feel like, oh, you know, this person isn't going to listen to me? Maybe you started to tell them a story and they cut you off. Or maybe you're telling them how you feel and they start telling you, oh, don't feel like that. Or like, oh, you know, that's not the right reaction. And, you know, they're starting to make you feel wrong for your feelings and, you know, what you're telling them. that you just want to walk away. Again, you want to be with someone who respects you and listens to you and who you feel like you can communicate openly with and be seen and heard. And so if you find yourself being cut off in a story, maybe they don't want to hear what you have to say, and so you're censoring yourself, then that's definitely the time to walk away. All right, so those are my 5 red flags for the dating, talking stage of the relationship. I would love your feedback, and feel free to like and comment on this video. I would love to hear it. And I will see you on the next episode. Thanks so much for joining me on this episode of the Aligned and Confident Dating Podcast with me, your host, Colette Gallagher. If you liked this video, please subscribe down below. Hit that like button. I would love to hear your comments. Please leave your comments down below. And please join us in my free Facebook group, the Aligned and Confident Dating Facebook group. I'll post a link in the section below. So please go ahead and join there. I'll be giving you some free stuff, answering your questions, and I would love to see you in there. Have an amazing day, and I will see you next time.